back to Free Speech Nation. The Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, broke with Parliamentary convention this week by accepting a Labour amendment on an SNP vote calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. And the decision led to chaotic scenes in Westminster as MPs left the chamber rather than voting. Hoyle said he made the unprecedented move due to concerns that MPs might be physically attacked if he didn't. Let's have a listen.
I will defend every member in this House. Every member matters to me in this House. And it has been said, both sides, I never, ever want to go through a situation where I pick up a phone to find a friend of whatever side has been murdered by terrorists.
And author and journalist Ross Clark has been writing about this story, and he joins me now. Ross, thanks very much for joining me on Free Speech Nation.
Hi.
Ross, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. Can you hear
Wonderful.
me?
Ross, can I ask you first, before we begin, I just want to ask about this issue of potential collusion here. There have been accusations or suggestions that Keir Starmer had been told that he would need to fix the Speaker. In other words, he went in and had a bit of a showdown with Lindsay Hoyle, and at the end of it, this occurred. Do you think that there are discussions to be had about whether or not Starmer put pressure on the Speaker here?
Well, if that's what did happen, I mean, the person who should be resigning is not Sir Lindsay Hoyle, but Keir Starmer. If Keir Starmer really did nobble the Speaker in that way, and I'm not sure that he did, but if he did, then he's the one who should be resigning, not Sir Lindsay Hoyle.
Well, OK, well, that's perhaps one issue, but then there's also the issue of what Lindsay Hoyle said in that apology speech, which is that there was a risk of actual threats against MPs. Is it the case that the Speaker of the House should be changing parliamentary convention on the basis of threats?
No, he absolutely should not. I mean, we have robust democratic debate in this country. It gets heated sometimes, but what we don't do is take our cue from bullies and thugs and terrorists. And if Sir Lindsay Hoyle really did sort of change the parliamentary debate in relate to threats by people who are threatening MPs, then that is a very serious matter. Of course, whoever's, I mean, he was a bit sort of, avoiding the sort of, didn't tell us exactly very much of it, sort of veiled in his sort of accusations of, he said threats have been put against MPs. He didn't say who by and what they consist of, but we know that, mobs have been gathering outside one or two MPs' houses and sort of demanding that they sort of vote for or call for an unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. And I mean, that is totally unacceptable behaviour in a democracy. If you want to protest outside Parliament, not outside MPs' houses. And if Lindsay Hoyle really did say that, react to those threats and by reorganising a debate, breaking with parliamentary convention, well, that's an extremely sad day and extremely concerning. I mean, if MPs need greater security, then they should have greater security, but never should thugs, terrorists or anybody else dictate what MPs can talk about in the Commons.
Can I ask you, Ross, about the vagueness of the language? It looks like the word he was failing to use was Islamist. He alluded to the death of David Amess, and obviously that was a man who was killed by an ISIS sympathiser. But after David Amess's death, we had Parliament just debating about whether we should crack down on mean tweets online rather than addressing the obvious issue that is right in front of our face. Is that the problem here?
Well, it was very much a problem with Sir David Amess's death. For a few weeks we were sort of led to believe that it was some sort of random individual who'd been worked up into a frenzy by, just normal stuff being talked about on Twitter. And no, it turned out that he was an Islamist terrorist. And, when Jo Cox was sadly murdered, the Labour MP murdered in her Yorkshire constituency, I mean, nobody had any trouble within hours of saying this was a a murder by a right-wing extremist, and we had a huge debate, and it was sort of blamed on the sort of Brexit debate, things people had said in the Brexit debate. Well, with the David Amos's case, it was all sort of, the sort of true nature of that crime was covered up. I mean, it was eventually aired in the court case, and the guy was jailed. But we should be treating things evenly here. And I think you get this idea from the Prevent program as well. The Prevent program was set up principally to deal with Islamist terrorism, and over the years, it sort of slightly changed its emphasis and sort of focusing now on the far right. Well, there are people on the far right who are a threat, but they are not in the same league as the sort of Islamist threat that we've been facing ever since the London tube bombings in 2005 and the sort of numerous attacks we've had since then.
So is it a case that the politicians and the political class generally is just too intimidated to talk openly about this problem? Or is it the case that it could be a kind of soft form of racism? This idea that they see the Islamic community as uniquely combustible and they better not say anything about this, because that strikes me as very patronising to the vast majority of British Muslims who also abhor this kind of violence.
Well, absolutely. I think there's an element of that. And of course, one must absolutely distinguish between Islamists and ordinary Muslims. I mean, Islamists are extreme political activists who claim to be acting on behalf of Islam, but don't really represent the vast majority of Muslims, as you say. Generally, I think MPs have been quite robust over this, and I don't sort of notice too many MPs pulling their punches. But there was this Lindsay Hoyle is the issue. He was the only one who was sort of calling that. And I think, well, does he really think that? Was he really reacting to what he said he was reacting to? Or was it a bit of an excuse to get out? Well, he knew he'd made a cock up and he was sort of introducing this issue, in order to sort of excuse his behaviour. I'm not quite sure what his genuine reasons were on Wednesday for doing what he did and accepting a Labour amendment on a SNP opposition day, which, of course...
I like to take him at face value, because if he's saying that he was concerned about threats, if he's saying that he's going to completely upend parliamentary convention on the basis of threats, he's effectively saying that terrorism works, and our liberal democracy and the values of our liberal democracy can be damned. That to me is even worse, isn't it?
Well, yes, exactly. That's what he would be saying. One has to add that, what happened last Wednesday was an extremely sort of boring issue in a way. Who cares about opposition day motions, even less when they're the SNP ones? But, this thing sort of erupted really because of the reasons that Sir Lindsay Hoyle gave for accepting the Labour amendment. And, otherwise I sort of would have just died away. But, the other side to it is to what extent was Keir Starmer involved? And did he really nobble the Speaker, as some are alleging to do? Because if he did, I say, it's him who should be in trouble, not Sir Lindsay Hoyle.
So then is this really a question about the necessity of having a Speaker who is impartial? I note that some people in the House of Commons were calling for a return of John Bercow, the most politically partisan Speaker we've ever had, which is not the way to fix this problem. So is it just the case that, Lindsay Hoyle has failed to maintain his impartiality?
As I say, I don't know his genuine reasons for what he did on Wednesday, but I say the irony is that John Bercow had been a Conservative MP. And of course, the Speaker, when he becomes Speaker, is neutral, becomes a party all of himself. But, John Bercow was often favouring Labour, and he was a former Conservative MP. Now we've got a former Labour MP in the chair, and he seems to be favouring Labour as well. So I don't know, do we ever get a Speaker who favours the Conservatives? But obviously it's a very, very difficult job because, when you get amendments put down, the Speaker has to choose which amendments to accept. And which amendments you accept, of course, is a very strong political issue. And, you can't really win if you're the Speaker. You've got a list of 10 amendments. You've got time to accept 3 of them. Well, what basis do you choose those 3? So I think whatever decision you make as a Speaker, you're going to be in trouble. But
Absolutely. Well, maybe we just get an AI robot Speaker, something like that. Ross Clark, thanks ever so much for joining me on Free Speech Nation.